I was still holding the program from her funeral when my son told me I should think about selling the house. That was a Thursday. Lorraine had been in the ground for 3 days. The flowers people had sent were still on the dining room table, still mostly fresh, and Bryce was sitting across from me with a cup of coffee and a manila folder, and that particular expression he gets when he has already decided something and is waiting for you to catch up. My name is Howard Calloway. I'm 63 years old. I spent 31 years as a licensed electrician in Pittsburgh. Commercial work, mostly office buildings. A hospital over in Shadyside. I retired 2 years ago. My wife Lorraine and I had been married for 35 years. We had one son. His name is Bryce. He is 38 years old and he works in financial services, and he has very clean shoes and the kind of confidence that comes from never having had to figure out where the money was coming from. I want to be clear about something before I go any further. I loved that kid without reservation from the day he was born. I coached his Little League teams through 4 seasons. I taught him to drive in the parking lot behind the old shop in Save on Route 51. When he passed his licensing exam at 26 and got his Series 7, I drove 4 hours to a hotel ballroom in Columbus, and I sat in a folding chair, and I watched him shake hands with people I had never met, and I was so proud I did not know what to do with it. I shook his hand afterward and told him so. I'm telling you this because I need you to understand that what happened next did not come from a bad father or a broken family or years of distance. It came from somewhere I never thought to look. Lorraine was diagnosed 18 months before she died. Pancreatic cancer. We found out together on a Tuesday afternoon in March, sitting side by side in Dr. Harwell's office while he explained things in the careful, measured way that doctors explain things when the news is not good. Lorraine held my hand the entire time. That was who she was. She could be getting the worst news of her life and she would still be the one keeping you steady. The last several months were hard in the way that kind of sick is always hard. We had a hospital bed brought into the bedroom. She had good days and bad ones. On the good days, she sat up, had her tea, watched the birds at the feeder outside the window. On the bad days, I sat in the chair beside her and I read, or I just stayed there because that is all you can do sometimes. You stay. About 3 weeks before she died, she said something that I filed away without understanding it. Howard, she said, I've taken care of some things. You don't need to worry about them yet. I assumed she meant the funeral home, the paperwork, the policies she kept organized in a binder on the shelf in alphabetical order, because that was exactly the kind of woman she was. I told her not to think about any of that. She looked at me for a moment the way she sometimes did, steady and a little private, and she said, I know you trust me. I always trust you. I said, I know, she said. That's why I did it. I did not ask what she meant. I thought it was the medication. I held her hand and we sat there until she fell asleep. She passed on a Sunday morning in November. The service was at Riverside Presbyterian, where she had attended for over 20 years. A lot of people came. Co-workers from the accounting firm where she had been a bookkeeper for most of her career, neighbors, people from her church circle. I stood at the graveside holding the framed photograph Sylvia had printed, and I did not cry. I could not tell you why. I had loved that woman more than anything I had ever built or fixed or figured out, and I stood there in the cold and I felt nothing but empty. 3 days later, Bryce came to the house. He had 2 coffees from the place he liked downtown and a manila folder under his arm, and he was wearing a jacket I had not seen before. Very pressed. He asked how I was sleeping. He asked if I had been eating. He said he just wanted to check in. Then he opened the folder. He said Lorraine had signed a deed modification 4 years ago, put his name on the property alongside mine. Estate planning, he said, standard stuff. She had not wanted me to be burdened with the legal complexity when the time came. He said it with a calm, explanatory tone, the same one he used when he was walking a client through something they did not fully understand yet. Then he said, I should think about downsizing. The house was a lot of upkeep for one person. He knew someone who could get me a fair number. I looked at him across the kitchen table. He had his mother's eyes, that pale gray color. He was looking at me like a problem he had already worked out on paper. I told him I was not going anywhere. He nodded slowly and said, of course, no rush, and finished his coffee and left. I stood in my kitchen for a long time. Then I went out to the garage and I sat down on the old wooden stool in the corner, and I stared at the workbench and I tried to figure out what had just happened in my own house. That garage is where Bryce and I spent a lot of time when he was growing up. We rebuilt a 1974 Chevy pickup in there when he was 16, 2 full summers. He was patient back then, careful with his hands, the kind of kid who would take a carburetor apart and lay every piece out in order on a clean rag so nothing got lost. I thought I had taught him that. The value of doing things right, of not cutting corners, of respecting what belonged to someone else. I sat on that stool and I looked at the workbench and I thought about the folder, about the deed. about the way he had said it all so smoothly, like he had rehearsed it. Then I thought about what Lorraine had said 3 weeks before she died. I've taken care of some things. I did not know what to do with that, so I just sat there. That was when Sylvia called. Sylvia is Lorraine's younger sister. She is 58 years old, and she taught middle school English for 27 years before she retired, and she is one of the steadiest people I have ever known. She said Lorraine had asked her to do something. She said Lorraine had made her promise to wait exactly 30 days after the funeral, not 29 days, not 31, 30. She said she could not explain more on the phone. She asked if she could come by the next morning. She arrived at 9. She had a wooden box with her, set it on the kitchen table without saying anything at first. Small box, maybe 10 inches long, 6 wide, dark walnut. Simple joints at the corners. I knew that box the second I saw it. I had made it. First year Lorraine and I were married, 1989. She had wanted somewhere to keep her grandmother's jewelry, and I was an electrician, not a carpenter, but I found a pattern in a woodworking magazine, and I spent 3 weekends in the garage making that box. It was not perfect. The lid was slightly uneven, and one of the joints on the left side did not close as clean as I wanted. But Lorraine had kept it on her dresser for 35 years. Every single day I could remember in that house that box was on her dresser. She said to give it directly to you, Sylvia said. She said you would know what it meant. She stayed for about an hour. She did not ask questions, and I did not have answers yet. When she left, I sat at the kitchen table alone with the box in front of me for a long time. On the front cover of the spiral notebook inside, in Lorraine's handwriting, it said, "For Howard, start with the drive." I did not open it right away. I made coffee. I sat with it, then I took my old laptop out to the garage, plugged in the USB drive, and I sat on the stool where I always sit, and I pressed play on the first file. Her voice came through the speaker and I had to stop it. I just needed a minute. I pressed play again. She had recorded herself first, an introduction. She said her name, the date, the purpose of the recordings. She said she was of sound mind. She gave her diagnosis and the date of it. Then she explained what she had been doing for the past 16 months and why. She said she had started noticing things about Bryce a few years before the diagnosis. Small things at first, the way he asked about the house, about the property value, about my pension and what I planned to do with it. The way his interest in those topics had a different quality than normal curiosity. Focused, returning to the same ground again and again from different angles. She said she had not been certain. So she started paying attention. She bought a small digital recorder. She kept notes in the spiral notebook, organized by date. She said she did not know what she was building toward. She wrote that she was not sure she would ever use any of it, but she said there was something in the way Bryce looked at the house, at the property, at me that told her she needed to be ready. She also explained the deed. She said Bryce had approached her about it 4 years ago. He framed it as estate planning, said it would simplify the transfer when the time came, said it would protect me from probate complications. She had agreed because it sounded reasonable and because he was her son and she trusted him. But after she got sick, after she started paying closer attention, she began to wonder if she had understood the full implications of what she signed. She said she had not been certain then either. That uncertainty was part of why she had started recording. There were 21 files total. I sat in that garage for close to 3 hours. I heard Lorraine's voice describe 14 separate incidents she had personally witnessed, organized by date, with as much specific detail as she had been able to record. Every one of them was about the house or the money or what would happen to me once she was gone. I heard Bryce on the phone with someone named Freddie, talking about a property deal and the timeline for it, talking about what they could net once the old house gets into the right hands. I heard Bryce in our kitchen asking Lorraine directly what the will said, and whether I had ever considered a smaller place somewhere warmer, and then I got to file 17. Lorraine had asked him point blank on a recorded call whether he had plans for the house beyond what he had told her. He said no, he was just thinking ahead. Being practical, nothing to worry about. His voice was smooth, careful, exactly the voice I had heard 3 days ago at the kitchen table. The file ended. A new one started. 11 minutes later by the timestamp, Bryce was outside. He had stepped onto the back porch to make a call. He did not know Lorraine was at the kitchen window with the recorder in her hand. I heard him say she's not going to make it to spring, and the old man's not going to know what hit him. I turned the laptop off. I sat in that garage for a long time. The workbench was right in front of me. The tools I had used for 30 years hanging on the pegboard where they had always been. The old stool Bryce used to drag over and sit on when he was 8 years old and I was working on something and he just wanted to be nearby. That was when I finally cried. I called a lawyer the next morning. Not the one Bryce had mentioned at the kitchen table, a different one. Lorraine had written a name and a phone number on the inside cover of the spiral notebook, right below the line that said "Start with the drive." Arthur Gaines, he had handled Lorraine's family estate years ago, and Lorraine had trusted him, which was enough for me. I drove downtown and sat in his office, and I told him everything. He listened without interrupting. When I finished, he asked if he could borrow the notebook overnight. I said yes. He called me the next afternoon and said he wanted to bring in a colleague named Gloria Reeves, who specialized in real estate fraud and what she called financial elder exploitation. He said he thought I needed to hear what she had to say. Gloria was direct and she did not soften things unnecessarily, which I respected. She reviewed the deed modification paperwork and she found something Lorraine had suspected but could not confirm on her own. The notary who had processed the deed signing had a documented business relationship with a firm Bryce had worked with. That alone was not enough to unwind anything. But then Gloria looked at the date on the modification and cross-referenced it with Lorraine's medical records, which showed that the signing had occurred during a 2-week window when Lorraine was on a high-dose pain management protocol following her first round of treatment. Gloria said that raised real and legitimate questions about whether Lorraine had been fully informed of what she was agreeing to and whether she had been in a position to evaluate it clearly. She said we had something. She said we needed to be careful about how we used it. What we did next was straightforward. Arthur's office contacted Bryce and told him there were estate documents that required his signature before the property transfer could be finalized. Routine paperwork, they said. Come in, bring your ID, should not take more than 30 minutes. Bryce came in on a Tuesday afternoon. He was calm, cooperative, friendly even. He chatted with Arthur's assistant. He signed where they told him to sign. He shook Arthur's hand on the way out and said to let him know if there was anything else needed. What he had signed was a formal declaration confirming the timeline and circumstances of the deed modification, including his role in initiating and facilitating it, combined with the financial records Lorraine had documented in the notebook, which showed a pattern of transfers out of the joint accounts during the months she was ill. Gloria said it was exactly what she needed. Bryce had walked in thinking he was moving things forward. He had signed a document that put him at the center of a case against himself. He did not know that until Arthur sent a letter to his attorney 6 days later. That was when it stopped being quiet. Bryce hired a lawyer from a firm downtown with a large glass lobby and a name that took up most of the letterhead. There were depositions, there were weeks of it. I drove downtown on various afternoons and I sat in conference rooms and I answered questions from people I had never met about my marriage and my finances and my relationship with my son. Some of those questions were hard to sit with, not because I had anything to hide, but because answering honestly required me to say out loud things I had spent months trying not to fully think about. One afternoon, about 3 weeks into depositions, Bryce's attorney asked me whether I believed my son had acted with deliberate intent to defraud me, or whether I thought he might have genuinely believed he was acting in the family's best interest. I sat with that question for a moment. Then I said I did not know, and that was the truth. I had listened to File 17 more than once by then. I had heard what he said on that back porch. But I also remembered the kid who sat on a stool in my garage and handed me tools without being asked and wanted to be near me just because I was there. I did not know how to hold both of those things at the same time. I still do not entirely. I answered every question as honestly as I could because that is the only way I know how to operate. In the 5th week, Bryce's attorney requested a meeting without clients present. Arthur and Gloria went in. I waited in the lobby with a cup of coffee I did not drink and a magazine I did not open. When Gloria came out, she sat across from me and folded her hands on the table the way people do when they are about to deliver something significant. He wants to settle, she said, voluntarily. Full relinquishment of any claim to the property, repayment of all transferred funds with interest, permanent removal from every financial account connected to the estate, in exchange no referral to the State Financial Regulatory Board, no professional misconduct filing with the licensing authority, his Series 7 stays intact. I asked her what her advice was. She said the regulatory path was uncertain and slow. Outcomes were hard to predict. What Bryce was offering returned to me everything that mattered in material terms. The house I had lived in for 25 years, the money Lorraine had documented, my financial security. What the settlement could not fix, she said, was everything else. But that was not something any legal agreement was going to address regardless of which path we took. I thought about Bryce sitting across from Arthur, calm and cooperative, signing documents he thought were working in his favor. I thought about him on the back porch with his phone. I thought about the 2 summers in the garage and the carburetor laid out piece by piece on a clean rag. I told Gloria to proceed with the settlement. I moved back into my house on a Wednesday in February. Neil from next door came over without being called and helped me carry boxes in from the truck. He did not ask questions. He just picked things up and carried them where I told him and set them down. When we were done, we stood on the front porch and looked at the yard, which had gone brown and flat over the winter. He nodded toward the fence line and said Lorraine had planted those herself, meaning the azaleas. I said yes, she had. We stood there for a minute and neither of us said anything else, and that was exactly right. About 6 weeks after the settlement, Nadine called me, Bryce's wife. She said she needed to talk and asked if she could come over. She arrived on a Saturday afternoon and she sat down at the kitchen table in the same chair. Bryce had sat in the day he brought the folder and the coffee and the plan he had been working on for years. She said she had not known everything. She said Bryce had told her things about me during the months leading up to Lorraine's death, that I had already spoken to a realtor, that I was planning to sell the house and restructure the estate in a way that would leave Bryce with nothing, that I had always been careless with money, and that she and Bryce needed to act before I made decisions that could not be undone. She said he told her these things calmly and with great certainty, and that she had believed him because she was scared, and because he was her husband, and because when someone repeats the same story to you in a small apartment with no one else around, after a while it starts to feel like the only story there is. She had found emails on his laptop after the settlement, exchanges between him and Freddie going back 14 months. They had been planning a property deal using funds Bryce had already moved. She had printed them and brought them with her in an envelope. She set the envelope on the table between us. I took it. I told her I would give it to Arthur. Then she said she had filed for divorce. I did not say much to that. I told her it took something to come here and say what she said. She nodded and looked at her hands. Before she left, I told her something Lorraine had said on one of those recordings, the part where she was talking to Bryce directly and he was denying everything. Lorraine had said that when someone makes you afraid of a person you have no real reason to fear, that feeling did not come from inside you. Someone put it there, and you can take it back out. Nadine sat with that for a moment. Then she said, "Thank you," and she left. I gave the envelope to Arthur the following Monday. He said the information would be useful. He said there were other avenues still open depending on what the emails showed. I told him to handle it however he thought best, and I meant it. I had done what I could do. The rest was his work now. I want to tell you something about what I think about when I think about that year. People expect you to come out of something like this with a clear villain and a clean lesson. And I understand that it is easier that way. But the truth is more complicated, and I think you can handle complicated. Bryce did something that I'm not able to excuse. He looked at his mother while she was dying and he calculated. He looked at me and he saw an obstacle. Whatever the original intention was, whatever justification he built around it, what he did was wrong and it cost him more than he expected. His career is under scrutiny. His marriage is over. He lost the trust of the only parent he has left. I do not take satisfaction in any of that. I'm telling you what is true, but I also think about Lorraine, sitting at the kitchen table at 6 in the morning before I was awake. She had her tea and her small recorder and her spiral notebook and whatever pain she was carrying that day. She was sick and she was afraid and she was running out of time, and she used that time to build something for me, not dramatically, not with any expectation that anyone would ever call it heroic. She just did the work quietly and carefully, the way she did everything. She left me a box I had made with my own hands 35 years ago. She put everything I needed inside it. She made sure the right person would deliver it at the right time. She thought of everything she could think of, and then she trusted me to do the rest. I found a photograph tucked under the lining of that box below where the USB drive had been, small print, slightly faded. I'm in it. I'm asleep on the couch in the apartment we had on Granger Street when we were first married. I'm 29 years old, and there is a book open on my chest and the afternoon light is coming through the window. I do not remember her taking it. I do not remember that Sunday at all. But she kept it for 35 years under the lining of a box I built her, and I never knew. I keep the wooden box on the workbench in the garage. Now that felt like the right place for it. Some Sunday mornings I drive out to Riverside Presbyterian Cemetery with coffee in a thermos. I sit on the bench near the oak on the east path, and I talk to her the way I always talk to her, straight and without any performance. I tell her the azaleas came back this spring, redder than last year. I tell her Neil finally repainted his shutters and they look good. I tell her Arthur closed the last of the paperwork and the house is mine, clean, no questions. I tell her I found the photograph. I tell her I understood. Here's what I want to say to you directly. If you are of a certain age and you have built something over a lifetime, a house, a marriage, a retirement you worked for with your hands and your years, pay attention to who is asking questions about it. Pay attention to who is in a hurry. The people who love you will wait. The people who are planning something will not. Trust the ones who do the quiet work. Trust the ones who show up without being asked and carry boxes and do not need to be thanked. And if someone who loves you has taken the time to prepare something for you, to think ahead on your behalf without telling you, take that seriously. That kind of love is rare, and it is worth every bit of the trust it asks for. I tell her I always trusted her. I tell her she was right to ask me to.